I never expected the silence to scream so loud. One missed call, one text unanswered, and suddenly the world stopped spinning. I told myself not to panic, that she had warned me, that the canyons might block service and they'd all be too busy roasting marshmallows or taking forced family selfies to check in. But still, it had been over 7 hours since Sophie's last message, and I couldn't ignore the echo of her voice yesterday morning, half joking, half dead serious. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll text you every 5 hours just to prove I'm not buried in a ditch." I stared at my phone as if I could will the screen to light up. It didn't. The apartment was too quiet. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual, the ticking of the wall clock mocking me with every second Sophie stayed silent. I sat at the edge of the couch, back stiff, palms damp. I checked the weather in Arizona again. 115 degrees. That wasn't weather, it was a threat. "She's fine," I whispered. I tried to believe it. She's with them. They wouldn't, they wouldn't let anything happen. But that was a lie. A well-dressed one, but still a lie. Robert had once forgotten Sophie's birthday. Evelyn had never asked her a single question that didn't start with "how's school" and end with a judgmental frown. Vanessa barely acknowledged Sophie unless there was a camera nearby. This trip wasn't about bonding, it was about optics. A last-ditch attempt by Eleanor to make the family appear united before some estate lawyer started sniffing around. Still, I let her go. I hated myself for it. My thumb hovered over the screen before opening Sophie's last message again. "We're heading into the canyon. Might lose service. All good though," followed by a sun emoji and a heart. The timestamp read 10:14 a.m. It was now 5:42 p.m. I tried to tell myself that was still within reason. Maybe they were hiking. Maybe they'd found a scenic spot and were just unplugging. I hit the call icon next to Sophie's name. It rang once, then again, then voicemail. I hung up. My chest tightened. I dialed Vanessa. Straight to voicemail. I dialed Evelyn. Ringing. Ringing. Then, "This is Evelyn Prescott. I'm unavailable. Leave a message." I didn't. My phone slipped slightly in my grasp. I caught it. Barely. "Don't spiral," I said out loud. But I already was. I walked to the window looking out at the half-lit street. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance. Somewhere someone was laughing. It felt unreal how the world just continued. I paced. I drank water. I sat. I stood again. I dialed Sophie one more time. Voicemail. I opened my laptop, hands trembling now. I Googled Arizona Highway Patrol, missing persons line. My fingers hovered over the call button. I didn't want to be that mother. Didn't want to admit this nagging feeling in my gut felt suspiciously like knowing. But then I saw the temperature advisory posted at the top of their page. Extreme heat warning temperatures up to 115 degrees Celsius in the Sonoran Desert Corridor. Avoid hiking midday. Risk of heat stroke elevated. That did it. I pressed call. A polite male voice answered. "Arizona Highway Patrol Missing Persons Division. How can I assist you?" "My daughter's 17, I said, barely recognizing my own voice. "She was on a trip with my family. I haven't heard from her in over 7 hours. "Do you have her full name, ma'am?" I gave it. Spelled it twice. He asked where they were going. I recited the little I knew. Some scenic canyon, probably antelope or something similar. They were flying out from Seattle 2 days ago. "Do you know if she has any medical conditions?" "No," I said. "She's healthy. She's smart." There was a pause. Then the voice returned lower, more serious. "Ma'am, did your daughter have enough water with her? The area she's in today, we're seeing extreme dehydration risks. 120 ground temps. No shade. It's dangerous." I didn't speak. He continued. "We'll log your call. If we get any related reports, we'll be in touch. If you hear from her, please update us." "Okay," I said, although I wasn't okay. I ended the call and just stood there. No tears. Just this deep, shaking cold inside my chest, despite the heat in the apartment. I walked to the bedroom, pulled out my old duffel bag. I didn't even think about what to pack. I just moved. Clothes, chargers, flashlight, the small first aid kit I hadn't touched in years. Then I picked up my phone again. I scrolled past everyone, past friends, past colleagues, past the polite, distant people I knew wouldn't ask the right questions. And I landed on one name, Caleb. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but he'd once promised, "If you ever call and say it's life or death, I won't ask why. I'll just come." I hit call. He picked up on the second ring. "Caleb, I need a favor." I said, my voice flat. "Okay," he said without hesitation. "No questions. Just get me to Arizona. Tonight." Arizona air isn't hot, it devours. And with every breath I took, I wondered, did my daughter scream? And if she did, who chose not to hear? By the time I stepped off the plane, the heat pressed against my skin like punishment. It wasn't the kind of heat that makes you sweat. It robbed you of that luxury. It just took your moisture, your breath, your clarity. Phoenix had already climbed to triple digits and the sun hadn't even peaked yet. Caleb stood by a battered Jeep, arms crossed, sunglasses, hiding eyes I remembered as once kind, now unreadable. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. He didn't ask questions. We were on the road before 6:15 a.m., the highway stretching out like a dare. The windows were cracked open, but the breeze that blew in only made the air inside feel hotter. Caleb handed me a bottle of water. I didn't drink it. "She texted me at 10:14 a.m. yesterday," I said. "Said they were heading into a canyon." Then nothing. Did the phone ever ping again? Once. Around 2:23 p.m. according to the carrier, somewhere near Crescent Ridge. Caleb shifted gears and glanced over. "That's a dead zone," meaning no signal. "No," he said, meaning no reason to be there. No shade, no water, no people. That's the kind of place you stop if you want no one to find you. Or I thought, if you want no one to find her? I held Sophie's photo up to my face again as if I could memorize it more. The slight dimple in her left cheek. The light in her eyes that hadn't been dulled yet. I couldn't think past the yet. We stopped at the first ranger station off the highway. The building looked like a relic from another era, wood siding bleached by sun, a dusty American flag swaying weakly overhead. I showed the photo to the man inside a sunburned Ranger in his 50s who wore mirrored shades and a permanent squint. He stared at the picture longer than I liked. "No," he said finally. "Haven't seen her, but lots of people come through. Could have missed her." "She would have been with 3 adults," I said. "Older woman, maybe early 70s. Blonde. And 2 others, my sister and her husband. SUV. Black Lexus, maybe a rental." Still, the Ranger shrugged. Back on the road, I repeated the process at a gas station, then another Ranger outpost farther north. Nothing. No one had seen them. Or they didn't want to say. "They're not amateurs." Caleb muttered, eyes fixed ahead. "They picked their spot." I remembered something. Sophie said they stopped at Crescent Ridge. His jaw tightened. "What?" "That's not a stop," he said. "It's a gap in the terrain. No marked trailheads, no campsites. I've only been there twice, both times to pull someone out." "Why would they go there?" Caleb didn't answer. But his silence filled the car like thunderclouds. By midday, the temperature climbed to 114 degrees Celsius. I had to force myself to drink the water he'd handed me earlier. It felt wrong, somehow cool relief sliding down my throat, while my daughter was out here somewhere parched. Or worse. We turned off the paved road onto a dirt trail riddled with rocks. The Jeep bounced and groaned, Caleb maneuvering it like second nature. A hawk soared overhead, casting a fleeting shadow. "There," I said, spotting the ridge. Caleb slowed. He scanned the area, eyes narrowing behind his sunglasses. We both got out. The sun was merciless. I couldn't even feel sweat had evaporated before it could form. There was nothing but red dirt, scrub brush, and silence. Then Caleb crouched. I followed his gaze. Half buried near a scorched boulder lay a plastic bottle. Sophie's? I knew it by the cracked unicorn sticker. My breath caught. I knelt beside it, fingers trembling as I brushed dirt off the surface. The seal wasn't broken, unopened. Why wouldn't she drink it? I whispered. Caleb said nothing. He rose, walking a few feet away, then stopped. Meredith. I stood and followed. He pointed at the ground. Tire tracks. Deep. Fresh. 4 sets leading away, not toward the spot where the bottle lay. She didn't wander off, Caleb said, voice low. She didn't get lost. I stared at the imprints, my stomach folding in on itself. He turned to me, face hard. This wasn't an accident, Meredith. They left her here. I found my daughter where no child should be found, not crying, not screaming, just still. Like the world had decided she didn't matter anymore. She was a smear of pink against the endless rust of the desert. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me. The heat could do that. Bend light, break logic. But then I saw the way her leg was bent awkwardly beneath her, how her fingers curled against her chest as if she'd tried to hold something tight. And I ran. My knees hit the dust before I even realized I'd fallen to them. Sophie. My voice cracked, but it barely stirred her. She wasn't unconscious, not fully. Her eyes fluttered at the sound. Her lips moved, but no words came. Just a sound like sand being rubbed between bone. I pulled her into the shade of the bush she'd been slumped beneath. It barely counted as cover, but even 5 inches of relief from the sun felt like a small mercy. Her skin was flushed, blistered at the edges. Her lips, cracked and pale, were barely a mouth anymore. Just a wound. Sophie, baby, it's me. It's Mom. I'm here. She blinked once slowly. Then finally she spoke. 1 sentence. They said they'd be right back. Her voice was so dry, so thin it hardly felt like it belonged to a living person. I didn't let her go. My arms stayed wrapped around her as I shouted for Caleb. He came running, his boots kicking up trails of dust behind him. One look at Sophie and he was already on the radio calling for emergency evac. I heard the clipped urgency in his voice even as I pressed my cheek to Sophie's temple and whispered lies meant to sound like comfort. You're going to be okay. You're safe now. I've got you. She didn't nod, but she didn't resist either. That was something. 15 minutes later, I heard sirens. I've never loved a sound more in my life. The paramedics were fast, efficient, but gentle. They slid a mask over Sophie's face, started IV fluids, immediately checked vitals. One of them, a woman with sunburnt cheeks and practiced hands, looked me in the eye and said, "You found her just in time. Another hour, maybe 2, and—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. I rode in the ambulance with Sophie, gripping her hand as they sped toward the local ER. Her body trembled with every bump in the road. Even unconscious, she looked afraid. In the sterile, icy blue chaos of the emergency room, they stabilized her quickly. Fluids, oxygen monitoring. Doctors and nurses moved around her like a tight, rehearsed dance. I sat beside her hospital bed, watching the saline drip into her veins like slow forgiveness. Every now and then, her fingers twitched. I didn't speak. I didn't cry. I just stayed. Eventually, her eyes opened. Barely. She looked at me, confusion clouded with pain. "Why, Mom?" she whispered. "Why them?" Her voice cracked in half with that question, and something inside me, something already bruised and bitter, fractured cleanly down the middle. "I don't know yet," I said, my voice low, steady. "But I swear on what's left of my soul, I will find out." She blinked, a single tear sliding from the corner of her eye, and her breathing steadied just enough for sleep to take her again. A nurse came in then, mid-30s, freckles, kind eyes. She held something in her gloved hand wrapped in a sterile bag. She kept this clenched in her fist when we brought her in. Didn't want to let go. I took the bag. Inside was a crumpled piece of paper folded twice. It was damp from her sweat, the ink slightly smudged. I unfolded it slowly. It was a single word written in a hand I knew too well. Vanessa. And beneath it, one word scrawled crookedly. Sorry. Guilt is cheap when you can afford lawyers. But that note, that one word, it cost me every memory I ever trusted. I held the folded paper in my hand for hours after the nurse gave it to me, even after they'd wheeled Sophie into a quiet recovery room and the machines confirmed that for now she was stable. Even after Caleb had gone to get us a room at a local motel promising to return before sundown. I couldn't put it down, couldn't throw it away, couldn't forgive it. Sorry. One word scrawled in Vanessa's handwriting, not even a full sentence, not even a name attached. No context, no explanation, just a whisper that burned louder than a scream. I sat in the corner chair of the motel room Caleb had rented for us, watching Sophie as she slept in the single bed wrapped in cool sheets, a fan rotating near the foot. Her skin still carried the angry red marks of sun exposure. Her lips were healing slowly, a sheen of balm softening the cracks. But her eyes, when they did open, looked different. Worn, like something inside her had been shelled out. It was July 7th, 2 days after I'd lost her, and 1 day after I found her. And I wasn't waiting anymore. Sophie stirred her lashes fluttering. I leaned forward immediately. She turned her head toward me and with effort spoke. They said it was a game, she whispered. That I'd be fine. My stomach clenched. Who said that? She didn't answer immediately, just closed her eyes like the effort had taken too much. Then after a few seconds she spoke again, voice flat. They took my phone, said it needed charging, said I should rest while they looked for a place to stop for lunch. I believed them. I sat back slowly. Her words were thin and simple, but the meaning behind them carved into me like stone. She hadn't been forgotten. She had been left. I reached into my bag and pulled out the old leather-bound notebook I hadn't touched in years. Its pages were already worn from another lifetime, old notes from therapy, scattered journal entries, letters never sent. I flipped to a clean page and wrote in all caps, July 5th, Arizona, 2:23 p.m., Crescent Ridge. Sophie left below that. I began listing names: Robert, Evelyn, Vanessa. Next to Vanessa, I underlined twice. Then in smaller letters, note found. Sorry. Vanessa's handwriting. Sophie drifted off again. Her body needed more sleep than I had questions. I let her rest. I stepped outside the motel room to get air, to scream silently into the dry sky, to pretend I wasn't suffocating. Caleb was waiting beside the Jeep, sipping from a plastic cup of motel coffee. He didn't say anything. He just passed me the second cup and waited. She remembers, I finally said. Pieces? He nodded. You ready to make this real? I already did, I said. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. My thumb hovered, then tapped the name, DeWitt Harold. The man picked up on the third ring. Meredith. It's been a long time. Too long, I replied. I need a legal review of the family trusts. Urgent. Specifically, anything involving Sophie or changes made since last November. There was a pause. All right, he said. Email me whatever you have. I'll start digging. I sent the text before he finished speaking. Subject: family trusts, urgent review. Possible foul play. After that, I did something I'd avoided for years. I called my mother. The phone rang, and I hoped desperately that she wouldn't pick up. But she did. Meredith. Her voice was as composed as ever, controlled. Even now, when her granddaughter had almost died in the desert, Eleanor Prescott spoke like a woman at a garden party. She nearly died, I said. A pause. I heard she replied, You should come home. There was no apology, no shock, just a command. Why, I asked. Because she said evenly things are unraveling, and you deserve to see the threads yourself. She ended the call. I walked back into the motel room and stared at Sophie. She was dreaming, twitching lightly under the thin sheet. I knew now that this wasn't just about a trip gone wrong. It wasn't just Vanessa being careless or cruel. It was deeper, older, premeditated. I pulled my old leather file folder out of my bag. It was faded at the edges, the corners bent. On the inside cover, I had written in red ink, Family Contingency, version 3. I'd started it the year my father died, kept it hidden through therapy, 2 near divorces, and every ugly Prescott holiday. It contained copies of old deed-scanned emails, journal entries, mostly paranoia and patterns. I flipped to a new section and started writing again. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. From DeWitt, Herald subject Re-Family Trusts, urgent review. The message was short. Just one sentence. There was a different will signed in April. You're going to want to see it in person. Families bury things, shame mistakes each other. I'd spent years learning how to survive their silence. I never learned how to weaponize mine. Until now. The rain was rare in July, even in Seattle. But that morning, it came down in sheets, heavy, cleansing, unapologetic. The kind of rain that strips everything bare. The kind that reminds you nothing stays hidden forever, no matter how deep it's buried. Sophie slept on the couch, curled into herself like a secret. Her breathing was steady, a metronome of survival. I had moved her from the hospital late the night before against quiet protests, but the doctors agreed she was stable enough. She needed familiarity, her own clothes, my presence, not fluorescent lights and hollow cafeteria food. I sat at the dining table with 3 piles in front of me: hospital records, police report, GPS logs from her phone. Next to that, my notebook, now 3/4 filled with observations, inconsistencies, triggers. I was no lawyer, no investigator. But I knew patterns. I knew manipulation. I'd grown up under its roof. My laptop chimed. Caleb's name popped up. One new attachment. I opened the file, a high-resolution photo taken from the edge of Crescent Ridge tire tracks in the dirt measured against a boot print. He had marked the angle, circled the drag marks that ended near the rock where Sophie had collapsed. The timestamp read, July 6th, 2:12 p.m. Beneath the image, his message. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was precise. I forwarded it into a new folder I had just created, Operation Desert Truth. The name felt ridiculous, dramatic, but it settled something inside me, gave shape to the chaos. The next email came an hour later. From DeWitt, Herald subject Prescott Holdings Trust, preliminary findings. There were 4 attachments: legal summaries, annotated PDFs of wills, financial statements I hadn't seen in over a decade. I didn't open them yet. Instead, I picked up the phone and called Eleanor. She answered on the first ring. You read it? She asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Not yet. It's not incomplete, she said, tone sharp. It's misaligned. It was meant to be reviewed with the family. But your father. She stopped herself. It should have been handled years ago. What does it say? I'll let Harold explain the fine print. But if you want to contest it, you'll need evidence. Real evidence. Not just guilt and implication. I stood at the window watching the rain dance on the glass like it had something to say. I have Sophie's medical records, her testimony, GPS logs, witness silence. Eleanor exhaled through her nose. If you want this door open, Meredith, there's no way to close it again. I never intended to close it, I said. I intend to walk through it. Later that afternoon, DeWitt called. You're sure? He asked, no preamble. Yes. If you open this file, he repeated, there's no putting it back. It'll trigger audit flags. Notifications will reach Robert and Evelyn. And Vanessa, if she's still on the active clause. You'll be showing your hand. I'm done playing nice, I said. Let them see my hand. A pause. Then check your email. I've created a secure Dropbox. Upload everything you have. I'll do the same. The folder was waiting when I clicked the link. Operation Desert Truth. Private, joint access. M. Prescott. H. DeWitt. E. Prescott. I dragged every file into it: the GPS logs, Caleb's photo, the voicemail record from Arizona Highway Patrol, Sophie's discharge summary. I attached the PDF of the folded note from the hospital bag, Vanessa's scrawl of sorry. Each file felt like another nail in a long, cold coffin. Before I uploaded the last batch, I hesitated, then opened my notebook and scanned in the last few pages my own thoughts. The things I hadn't said out loud. I wanted the truth documented, even if it was messy. Especially because it was messy. Then I hit sync. 5 minutes later, a text arrived. DeWitt. You realize you just declared war on your entire bloodline. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed back, I know, and hit send. Some doors don't creak. They snap open with the kind of silence that says, you should have stayed away. DeWitt's office hadn't changed in 15 years. Same dark oak walls, same brass lamp on the corner of his desk, same faint smell of dust and old law. It wasn't meant to impress, it was meant to contain, like a vault or a confession box. I stood just inside the threshold for a moment, soaked in the silence. Then Eleanor's voice broke it from the leather armchair by the window. You look like your father when he walked in here after the merger fell through. I'm not here to bury anything I said. I'm here to exhume it. DeWitt didn't smile. He merely gestured to the seat opposite his desk and waited until I sat before reaching into the drawer. He placed a single manila folder on the table. It was thinner than I expected. No dramatics, he said. No build-up. Just the facts. He opened the folder and slid a stapled set of documents across the desk. The header read, Revised Testamentary Instructions. Eleanor Prescott. Dated April 4th, 2023. I scanned it, every word somehow screaming through the typeface. My name was there. Sophie's too. But what stopped me cold was the clause marked Section 7B, to Sophia Wren Prescott upon her 18th birthday, or by durable proxy, I bequeath the following. Prescott Street, Townhouse, Seattle, WA, full art collection, insured value, 1.2 million. Real property, Flagstaff Vineyard Estate. Total estimated estate value, 4.2 million. My breath caught. Why Sophie? I asked, eyes flicking to Eleanor. Why her? Eleanor didn't hesitate. Because your daughter has more soul than the rest of them combined. She's 17, I said. She still draws sunflowers on napkins when she's bored. And they don't, Eleanor replied. They stopped seeing beauty when it stopped making them money. I wanted to believe it was love. But Eleanor Prescott didn't operate on sentiment. She operated on leverage. I turned to DeWitt. Did they know they didn't know, he said carefully. But they sniffed it. They always do. Evelyn's been pressing our mutual banker for months about asset reallocations. Robert keeps asking about appraisal values. And Vanessa. He paused. She asked me directly 3 weeks ago, what happens if Sophie's no longer in the picture? My hand tightened around the armrest. Jesus. Language. Eleanor murmured, then added, but yes. DeWitt leaned forward and tapped the bottom of the will. This document is valid only if Sophie remains living and capable on the date of Eleanor's passing. If she were to die before that, or be deemed unfit, the inheritance defaults to the original 2011 structure. Split 3 ways. Robert, Evelyn, Vanessa. All they needed was for Sophie to vanish. And if she'd died out there in that canyon, I said slowly, this version would have expired. DeWitt nodded. Without a witness. Yes. No evidence of intent. They'd inherit and no one would question it because the girl was missing, not murdered. I felt sick. Eleanor lit a cigarette, something she hadn't done in front of me since I was 16. She took one long drag before speaking. They won't stop. unless they think you're dangerous. I turned to her. What are you suggesting? Her eyes so cold and clear locked on mine. Let's give them a reason. I leaned back, suddenly aware of the weight pressing against my spine, not from the chair but from history, from legacy, from blood that curdled instead of bonded. They had tried to erase my daughter. They had almost succeeded. But now they had to see me coming. And for once, I wouldn't move quietly. Outside, the sky in Tacoma began to cloud gray, swallowing blue. Inside, I looked at the will again and whispered to myself, let's burn everything they tried to bury. Some families eat with knives and forks. Ours preferred daggers and deniability. The dinner table stretched longer than necessary, polished to a mirror shine beneath an antique chandelier that hadn't seen an off switch in 50 years. Eleanor's estate hadn't changed, same creaking floors, same watchful portraits that lined the dining room like ghosts, silently judging the living. They watched us now, hollow-eyed and omniscient, as if waiting for history to repeat itself one more time. Sophie sat to my right, her fingers lightly touching the edge of her plate. She wasn't eating, none of us really were. But she was composed, alert, a warrior beneath soft skin. Vanessa entered last, the sound of her heels clicking across the tile like a warning shot. She greeted Sophie with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and bent low enough to kiss her cheek. I could see Sophie stiffen. So could Caleb, who stood at the edge of the room, not quite a guest, not quite staff introduced earlier as a security consultant at Eleanor's suggestion. Robert was already seated, swirling his wine glass like the liquid inside might offer him a better family than the one in front of him. Evelyn had positioned herself across the table from Sophie and stared directly past her as if the girl were made of fog. Such a beautiful evening, Robert said, as if reading off a cue card. The roses are late this year. The groundskeeper blames the ash from the Canadian fires. No one responded. Vanessa raised her glass to Sophie. You look well, she said, her voice breezy. Stronger than I expected, actually. Desert air builds character, I said before Sophie could reply. Vanessa's smile flickered. Eleanor, seated at the head of the table like a judge watching the accused, sliced into her roast with clinical efficiency. Funny how legacies can shift overnight, she murmured. One moment you're an heir, the next, just history. Robert chuckled too quickly. Evelyn reached for her water. Vanessa's hand paused halfway to her wine. Sophie looked at me. I gave the smallest nod. She turned to the table, her voice soft but steady. I don't remember everything she began. Just pieces, like snapshots. The sun was really high. I remember that. Silence. I remember Vanessa asking for my phone to charge it. Then she and Aunt Evelyn walked away. I thought they'd be right back. Vanessa tilted her head. Sweetheart, we never. Sophie didn't look at her. But they weren't. Robert cleared his throat. Maybe now isn't the time. I remember a sound, Sophie continued, unfazed. A car starting. Laughter. Like someone thought it was all a joke. The wine glass slipped from Vanessa's hand and shattered on the floor. Red wine bled into the white tablecloth like a wound. Everyone froze. Sophie sat back in her chair, expression unreadable. That's the last thing I remember before it got too hot to think. For a full 10 seconds, no one spoke. Then Eleanor placed her fork down with deliberate finality. Children, she said calmly, have a remarkable way of revealing truths adults spend fortunes trying to bury. Robert stood abruptly. If this is some kind of ambush, sit down, Eleanor snapped. He did. I felt Caleb shift behind me, then a soft breath near my ear. She just confirmed guilt, he whispered. The question is, did she know you recorded it? I've learned that the truth never hides. It just gets buried under the paperwork no one wants to read. I used to file invoices at a law firm for exactly 9 months and 12 days, long enough to understand how people lie on paper, always with numbers that don't match and dates that whisper instead of shout. But today, I wasn't reading someone else's truth. I was unraveling my family's attempt to erase mine. The home office had turned into a war room. My laptop was flanked by medical records, GPS printouts, phone screenshots, Sophie's typed statement 3 pages long and growing. I hadn't left the apartment in 36 hours and my coffee tasted like vengeance. The first breakthrough came at 2:11 a.m. Sophie's sodium levels and core temperature from the ER were logged at 4:07 p.m. on July 6th. She had been found around 3:30 p.m., and her GPS data last pinged at 2:23 p.m. on July 5th, exactly when she'd texted, "We stopped at Crescent Ridge." That was the last message sent from her phone. I highlighted the timestamp in yellow, then matched it to the medical timeline and marked both in bold, abandoned 2:30 p.m. July 5th. Found 3:30 p.m. July 6th. Total time exposed 25 hours. I forwarded the summary to DeWitt and BCC'd Caleb, adding the subject line, matched timestamps, ASH, medical plus GPS, argument neglect, criminal endangerment. The next clue wasn't digital. It came from dust and gas receipts. Caleb called from Flagstaff. "Remember that gas station off Highway 64 just north of Crescent?" I did. I talked to the night clerk. She remembered seeing a redhead in hiking gear come in on the 5th. Said she didn't speak. Just stared at the bottled water fridge and walked out. "That was Sophie," I said. "I thought so too," he replied. But here's the kicker: Vanessa came in an hour later. Bought gum. Said she was waiting on a kid. The timeline snapped again. I opened Sophie's phone log. One unsent message. "Where are you? It's hot." It had never left the phone, just sat in her draft folder wilting. Then in Vanessa's outgoing messages retrieved via synced cloud backup, I found it. Text to Sophie, July 5, 4:07 p.m. Went for gas, be right back. Stay put. Sent 90 minutes after they had already left her. I copied the thread and filed it in a new folder, Fabricated Communications. Beneath that, I added the note, intent, to mislead, calculated negligence. Meanwhile, Caleb had been chasing tire tracks and talking to every camp host and clerk in a 40-mile radius. He called again at dusk. Got something. My heart paused. RV owner parked at Eagle Ridge Trailhead. He saw the Hale SUV pull up around 2:15 on the 5th. Said a teenage girl stepped out with a backpack. Then get this, they drove off. No one looked back. Did he report it? No. Thought it was weird, but not his business. He just remembered the girl looked confused. Would he testify? He already offered to. I have his number. DeWitt's drawing up the witness affidavit now. I looked at the wall where Sophie's drawing from 2 years ago still hung, a sketch of our old house sunflowers, and the words, "Home is where someone waits." She'd waited. They'd left. And now I had paper to prove it. My inbox pinged. New email from Lydia Chen. Subject: Sophie Prescott. Confirming viability of criminal neglect charges. Body ready when you are. Need sworn statement. Let me know if your daughter is strong enough to speak. I stared at the screen. Are we ready? I turned toward the hallway where Sophie slept, her door slightly ajar. Her breath was even, but her fists still clenched in her sleep. She was ready. And so was I. I expected a fight. I didn't expect them to strike first and so low. It started with a headline. Runaway teen found after family argument, exclusive details. I stared at the glowing screen in Eleanor's library, my breath snagging halfway in my throat. The article dripped with half-truths and poisoned nuance. Sophie was anxious-spirited, sometimes difficult. I was painted as a single mother with unresolved trauma, estranged from my prominent family after years of tension. The phrase that stopped me cold: sources suggest the teen left voluntarily after an emotional altercation with her mother. Vanessa didn't just go for the throat, she ripped out the truth, dressed it in a Sunday suit and paraded it across every clickbait site with a PR smile. By noon, Sophie's name was trending in a way no mother ever wants. She hadn't seen it yet. But she would. At 2:03 p.m., I got a call from Sophie's school. "We need to discuss your daughter's emotional stability," the principal said, as if she were referring to a car engine. "Some parents have raised concerns about her presence on campus." I almost laughed. "She was left to die in a desert," I said. "The only concern should be why that hasn't made your newsletter." Silence. Then bureaucratic hemming. "We're just looking after the collective well-being of our students." Translation: protect the tuition-paying majority, not the abandoned girl who threatens the status quo. Sophie came into the kitchen later holding her phone like it was on fire. "They're saying I ran away," she whispered. "That I made it up." Her eyes didn't brim with tears. They boiled. "I didn't even talk to anyone," she said. "Why would they believe them because they had money? PR teams, lawyers, decades of sculpted credibility. The kind of power that doesn't beg for belief, it buys it." That night, Eleanor called a press conference. No press were invited. She simply stood at the grand piano room of her estate, now outfitted with a live stream camera and 3 chairs, and delivered a 10-minute statement that scorched the polished floors beneath her. "I am the matriarch of this family," she began, her voice clear. "And I say this with neither hesitation nor regret. My granddaughter Sophie Prescott was abandoned. Not lost. Not dramatic. Not rebellious. Abandoned. By members of this family I once trusted." The video, trimmed and captioned by Caleb within the hour, went viral. Even the tabloids blinked. The next day, Sophie gave her first public interview, quiet, short, precise. Sitting beside me in a navy blue sweater, her voice steady but laced with iron. "I wasn't lost. I was left. Ask them why." No theatrics, no sobbing. Just the weight of truth dropped like a gavel. But truth doesn't go unpunished. 3 days later, I opened a certified envelope addressed to me. Inside, a lawsuit, filed by Vanessa Prescott. Claim defamation of character, emotional distress, damage to reputation. They weren't just denying guilt, they were coming for blood. When your enemies start shouting, you learn to sharpen your silence, because a quiet roar delivered at the right time can bring down dynasties. I sat at the breakfast table in Eleanor's garden, the one framed by climbing roses and a stone cherub missing half a wing. Sophie was upstairs with Caleb going over witness prep. The birds were quiet. Even the leaves hung still, as if the estate itself was holding its breath. In front of me lay a navy blue folder, the one DeWitt called the Hammer. It held everything: time-stamped GPS records from Sophie's phone, the hospital intake forms, photos of the tire tracks Caleb had measured down to the millimeter. And the audio. 4 seconds. Vanessa's voice. A laugh, high and clipped, echoing inside a car as the engine revved. I had listened to it only once. That was enough. Eleanor passed behind me, placing a delicate porcelain teacup by my elbow. "You don't need to rehearse anymore, Meredith." "I'm not rehearsing," I said. "I'm remembering." At 2:00 p.m., I got the text I'd been waiting for. "Evelyn wants to meet. Says it's private. Neutral ground." She picked the school. Neutral ground. They always want that when they realize the battlefield isn't theirs anymore. The meeting room was a forgotten corner of Sophie's campus: old stone walls, varnished floors, a table with water that no one touched. Caleb waited outside the door like a shadow that wouldn't blink. Evelyn arrived precisely at 2:30. Impeccable. Pearl earrings, tailored navy dress, and a smile as rehearsed as a politician's handshake. "You look tired, Meredith," she said, voice low and almost maternal. "I can only imagine the stress." "I sleep fine," I replied. She sat, hands folded. "This lawsuit? The press? It's not what Father would have wanted." I let the silence settle between us until she shifted. Then she continued. Whatever happened, Vanessa is under immense pressure. She's fragile. You always had a dramatic streak. Maybe there's a way to resolve this without dragging everyone through the mud." There it was. The plea dressed as grace, The call for unity from a woman who left my daughter to die under the Arizona sun. I reached into the folder, pulled out the small recorder, pressed play. Vanessa's laugh filled the room. Loud, clear, distant enough to feel like a memory, sharp enough to cut. Evelyn froze. Her face didn't crumble, it calcified. Mouth flat, eyes narrowed. After 4 seconds, I hit stop. She whispered, "Delete it." I looked her dead in the eye. "No." She leaned back, spine stiff. "If you go forward with this, there will be consequences. Family divides that will never mend." "There already are," I said. "And Sophie didn't divide us. You did." I left before she could recover. The door clicked shut behind me and Caleb stood. "You good?" he asked. "I'm done being anything else." By the time we reached the car, my phone buzzed. "Lydia Chen," I answered without a word. Her voice was steady. "Charges are filed. First hearing is in 3 weeks. Tell Sophie to be ready. Courtrooms aren't theaters." But today, as I walked into that wood-paneled room, I could almost hear the overture of a play written in bloodline and betrayal. The Flagstaff County Courthouse stood like a monument to forgotten truths, sandstone walls, creaking doors, and a temperature inside that somehow mirrored the furnace outside. Still, the air wasn't hot in the traditional sense. It shimmered with tension, anticipation, a silence only a gavel could break. Sophie sat beside me, her palms pressed flat on the oak bench. I could see the slight tremble in her fingers, but her eyes stayed fixed on the judge's bench. Steady, present. The sunlight from the high windows streamed in at an angle that seemed designed as if fate itself had appointed a spotlight. It landed on her hair, her shoulder, the side of her jaw. No one else. DeWitt leaned toward me, whispering, "Let the defense go first. Let them waste their thunder." I nodded once. Across the aisle, Vanessa sat perfectly upright, a cream-colored blouse buttoned to the collar. Robert adjusted his watch repeatedly. Evelyn looked paler than I remembered, a white scarf wrapped tight around her neck like a noose made of silk. Judge Herrera entered, dark-robed and clear-eyed. "This court will now hear the matter of Arizona vs. Hale case, 8-17-1 ACI. Charges of felony child endangerment, aggravated neglect, and conspiracy to obstruct medical assistance." My heartbeat didn't race. It pulsed slow, measured. I had waited for this. Vanessa's lawyer, a polished man named Norris Gray, stood. "This case," he began smoothly, "is not about monsters or martyrs. It's about family, miscommunication. A tragic misunderstanding blown into hysteria by media manipulation and wounded emotions." He gestured toward me. "We will prove there was no criminal intent, only a breakdown in logistic cell service and temperament. Let's not criminalize imperfect parenting." No one spoke, not even a cough. Then DeWitt rose slow, like a storm gathering. "Your Honor, we intend to prove not just neglect, but deliberate abandonment timed with motive and opportunity that nearly cost a 17-year-old her life. This was no accident. It was a calculated act driven by greed and wrapped in the silence of a guilty family." He sat, and the court exhaled. First, he called the paramedic, the one who found Sophie in the canyon. She was non-responsive, BP dangerously low, lips cracked. Core temperature well above normal. She was 2 hours from renal failure. That's not getting lost. That's exposure abandonment. DeWitt displayed the photo. Caleb had taken a wide shot of the scorched ground, Sophie's water bottle beside a boot print, the SUV's tire tracks dragging off toward nowhere. I looked across the aisle. Robert's jaw worked in rhythm with some unseen grudge. Evelyn dabbed at her temple with a tissue. Vanessa didn't blink. DeWitt turned slightly toward Sophie. "Your Honor, we would like the court to hear from the victim." The judge nodded. Sophie stood. Her voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. I remember the heat first, then the sound of gravel under tires. I asked if they were coming back. Aunt Vanessa laughed. 4 words. Just 4. Aunt Vanessa laughed. You could feel the room stiffen, even those who didn't know her. Especially those who did. DeWitt stepped back. Sophie sat down, gaze steady. She hadn't cried. She didn't have to. Judge Herrera adjusted his glasses. This court will reconvene tomorrow. The defense may prepare for rebuttal. The gavel dropped once, crisp, final. Outside the courtroom, I paused by the pillars. Sophie looked up at me. Did I do okay? I put my arm around her shoulders. You shattered the ceiling. Inside, the stage was cleared. But tomorrow, the next act begins. The truth didn't explode. It cracked, slow, deliberate, like glass under heat, until finally, it collapsed. The second day in court began with a breath held by everyone. You could feel it in the way jurors sat straighter, in the whisperless hush that blanketed the courtroom. Even the stenographer, usually mechanical in her rhythm, seemed to pause a beat longer before striking the first keys. Vanessa sat with her arms folded tightly, her chin up like she was daring the sky to fall. Evelyn beside her looked hollowed out, her skin pale against the navy of her jacket. Robert Ever, the statue, had his eyes trained on a corner of the ceiling, as though pretending he wasn't in the room might alter the outcome. DeWitt stepped to the center of the floor with a simple device in hand. The same recorder. The one I'd used with Caleb's mic at the dinner. He pressed play. Vanessa's voice filled the courtroom. Calm at first. Conversational. Desert air builds character. A clink of glass. Laughter. Eleanor's remark about shifting legacies. Then Sophie. I remember a sound. Someone laughing. And then, Vanessa, unmistakably her. She won't last an hour out there. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The jury exchanged looks. The judge lifted a brow, then said, Order. That's when Vanessa stood. You tricked me, she shouted, pointing across the aisle. You edited that. You're under oath tomorrow, Ms. Prescott, the judge cut in sharply. You may want to consider your words carefully. Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm, but she shrugged it off. This was a setup. I was being sarcastic. That's not... I didn't mean it like that. The judge banged the gavel once. Order in this courtroom. Evelyn's hands trembled on her lap. She leaned toward Vanessa, whispered something frantic and low. But Vanessa was beyond whispering. Her jaw clenched as she sank back into her seat, fuming. DeWitt turned slowly to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, intent hides in tone. In context, inconsistency. This isn't the only evidence we have. Detective Lydia Chen took the stand next. Calm. Crisp. We retrieved deleted text messages from Ms. Vanessa Prescott's phone, including one sent an hour and a half after Sophie's phone last pinged from Crescent Ridge. She looked toward the judge. It read, left her near the ridge, should be dramatic enough. Gasps this time. No one could help it. Lydia continued. Coupled with GPS records and witness testimony, this message contradicts every earlier statement claiming a miscommunication. Evelyn's composure finally cracked. I didn't think she began, then clutched her purse like a lifeline. We thought she'd turn back. We just left her for a few hours. Her voice broke, brittle and desperate. Robert reached for her arm, but she flinched away. We thought she'd turn back. She cried again, louder this time, almost pleading with the walls. The judge raised both hands. That's enough. Ms. Hale, if you wish to testify, you may request a statement through counsel. Evelyn collapsed into her chair. The jury stared, stunned. I didn't move. I didn't smile. This wasn't a victory. It was exposure. And exposure has a gravity of its own. I turned my gaze toward Sophie, seated in the back row today. She didn't flinch. Her eyes were locked on Vanessa, steady and clear. No tears. No shaking. The girl they left in the canyon was gone. Judge Herrera cleared his throat. We will reconvene tomorrow for closing statements and verdict. The gavel struck like a drumbeat. And just like that, the masks finished breaking. Some legacies crumble with scandal. Hours shattered on the silence of a 17-year-old girl who refused to disappear. The courtroom was colder than the last 2 days, not in temperature but in atmosphere. Finality changes the air. You could feel it settle on the jury box like dust on old furniture, reluctant but inevitable. Every seat was filled. Reporters lined the back row. Sophie sat beside me again, her fingers curled loosely around a smooth river stone Caleb had handed her that morning. He'd said it was from Crescent Ridge, smoothed by fire and wind. Judge Herrera entered with his usual restraint, but the weight in his posture gave him away. He knew this case was larger than his courtroom. Larger than the law, even. A bailiff handed the verdict slip to the clerk, who unfolded it slowly. In the matter of Arizona versus Hale, she read, on the count of felony child neglect, we the jury find the defendant Vanessa Prescott guilty. No sound. Then a gasp. Then the shuffle of shifting bodies, one of those shared moments when no one breathes until someone else does. On the matter of civil liability in the abandonment and psychological trauma of minor Sophie Prescott, the clerk continued, we find Robert and Evelyn Hale liable for damages. My fingers didn't move. Sophie's did. She reached for my hand without a word. I gripped hers tight. The judge nodded once. Sentencing will be delivered in chambers. Bailiff. He didn't finish the sentence before the cuffs came out. Vanessa turned, still poised, but her face had curdled into something brittle and angry. You think this changes anything? She hissed at me, voice just above a whisper. I met her eyes for the last time. It already did. Outside the courthouse, the heat hit us like a spotlight. Cameras flashed. Reporters surged like a wave, too tired to crash, but too persistent to stop. Ms. Hale is justice served, Meredith. What will you do next? I kept Sophie between me and the noise. Caleb appeared, his arm gently guiding us through the crowd. DeWitt walked behind his presence, quiet and unbending. By the time we reached the SUV, Sophie leaned against the seat, closed her eyes, and said only one thing. Can we go home now? Yeah, I said. We can. Back at Eleanor's estate that evening, silence returned, but this time it didn't scream. It breathed. It softened. Eleanor stood by the window dressed in black. Not out of mourning, but command. She turned toward the camera crew from a national network, her words pre-written and unshaken. The future belongs to those brave enough to tell the truth. My granddaughter is one of them. Sophie watched the clip from the couch, head against my shoulder. It feels over, she murmured. Almost, I replied. But what matters already changed. She nodded, drifting to sleep, the stone from Caleb still warm in her hand. Later that night, I found a package waiting on the dining table. DeWitt's handwriting on the front, private terms from Eleanor's final codicil. Open, alone. I stared at it for a long time. The truth had cracked the world open. Now it was time to see what came next. Victory is strange. It doesn't taste sweet. It's hollow until you decide what to build inside it. The first morning in the new house, I walked barefoot into the backyard before the sun broke fully through the clouds. Dew clung to the grass like hesitation. Seattle air had always felt soft to me, gentler than Arizona, less dramatic, but not less serious. The quiet here was different, not empty, but expectant. The house wasn't grand, but it didn't need to be. 3 bedrooms, a long window in the kitchen that overlooked the yard, and tucked under the staircase a single drawer labeled for Meredith and no one else. Eleanor's handwriting, of course. I hadn't opened it yet. Not because I feared what was inside, but because there was no urgency left. The storm had passed. The codicil arrived on cream linen paper, sealed in wax. DeWitt's note was brief final terms per Eleanor's directive. As requested, no ceremony. Inside, it was clear. 70% of the estate to Sophie, 10% to me. The rest to foundations Eleanor had quietly supported: mental health programs, desert rescue funds, scholarship grants for girls who grew up knowing more about survival than softness. Sophie's reaction was one of near indifference. She already gave me what mattered, she said, as she handed the papers back to me. She believed me. Therapy began the following week. 1 hour every Tuesday in a warm office with too many pillows. Sophie didn't say much when she returned, but her shoulders eased an inch at a time. That was enough. Caleb showed up one Saturday with a bag of mulch, a shovel, and 3 small sprigs of lavender. No one plants lavender in Seattle, I told him. He shrugged. That's why you should. We dug in silence, the kind that didn't ache. Later, as the sun lowered and shadows lengthened, Sophie joined us with a cup of tea and sat beside the garden bed without saying a word. She just watched. Her silence used to frighten me. Now I understood it, her way of stitching the world back together. That night, as rain tapped against the kitchen window, she asked the question that had lingered in both of us for weeks. Are we done fighting? I looked at her. Really looked. The line between child and survivor blurred long ago. What remained was someone still growing, still open. Only if we've learned to live, I said. She nodded once, then reached for my hand across the table. After she went to bed, I opened my journal. Not the battered one filled with fear, timelines, and court notes. A new one. Clean pages. No shadows between the lines. At the top of the first, I wrote 5 words. Chapter 1. What survived. Not who. Not how. Just what. Because that's what mattered now, what we carried forward and what we chose to plant. We returned to the place they left her. Same dirt. Same sun. But this time she wasn't alone. Crescent Ridge hadn't changed. The wind still dragged sand in long, slow waves, as if the desert never truly rested, only waited. I hadn't expected it to feel familiar, but it did. Familiar and cruel. The silence here didn't echo. It hung. Thick. Ancient. Indifferent. Caleb pulled the truck to a stop near the same rock outcropping where we'd found her weeks ago. The heat shimmered above the hood. I handed Sophie a bottle of water, but she shook her head gently. Instead, she slipped the silver whistle from around her neck, the one I'd given her after the trial engraved with the date, and nothing more. She didn't speak. Just stepped down from the truck and walked toward the edge of the ridge. Her gait was steady, almost reverent, like someone visiting a grave they no longer feared. I stayed behind, letting her own the space. Caleb stood beside me, arms crossed. We didn't speak either. Not because there was nothing to say, but because the words would have felt too heavy, too forced. The wind kicked up a soft gust as Sophie reached the scrubby patch of dirt where we'd found her body curled weeks ago. She stood still for a long time. Then slowly she raised the whistle to her lips. The first blow was short, clear. It pierced the air. She paused. The second was longer, almost defiant. It echoed slightly off the rock face. Another pause. The third came like a closing sentence. Not loud, not angry, just final. Then silence. Not the kind that crushed, the kind that acknowledged. I walked toward her, stopping a few steps away. She didn't turn, but I saw her shoulders lift as she inhaled long and full. They tried to erase me here, she said softly. But I think I left a scar instead. I didn't reply. My presence was the only answer she needed. We stood together until the wind picked up again, tugging at our clothes, tossing dust like confetti. Sophie turned, gave me the faintest smile, not one of celebration, but recognition. A peace earned, not granted. On the drive back, she leaned against the window head, tilted eyes closed. Caleb didn't speak as he drove, but his hand reached to adjust the radio volume just as a song faded in Fleetwood Mac's The Chain. I didn't ask if it was intentional. I didn't need to. I reached for my journal, balanced it on my knee, and began to write again. No agenda. No witness list. Just thoughts. Sophie's breath slowed beside me. Caleb hummed under his breath, almost too quietly to notice, and I wrote. Not about what we'd lost, but about what refused to be taken. Some stories end with closure, others end with clarity. Meredith didn't just reclaim justice, she dismantled a legacy built on silence and rewrote it with truth. Like the final chord of a long forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but it resonates powerfully once it's heard. No wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of truth. If you felt something through this story, leave a 1 in the comments to show your resonance, or 2 if you think there's more to uncover. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can bring more stories like this to light.